I want to share with you what I've seen in the last 40 years when it comes to S Corporation. The thing is that S Corporation is actually a tax status that's changing all the time, okay? And a lot of entrepreneurs are taking advantage of S Corporation nowadays, especially after the government recently changed a few things here and there, okay? But before I just explain to you what I've seen in the last 40 years, I want to go back and explain to you what an S Corporation really is, okay? So an S corporation, S Corp, is actually a type of corporation that's actually designed to actually do one single thing, one simple thing, okay, to avoid the double taxation that regular corporations, C corporations, have to actually pay. So tax authorities typically treat an unincorporated business as a C corp. So if you are able to convert your C corp to an S corp, you are able to actually avoid the double taxation. Okay, and how does an S corporation work? Well, basically, you got to think about formation and election. So what happens here is that your business will legally register with the state as a corporation. Then you need to file Form 2553 with the IRS to actually implement the conversion. You got to really also think about ownership and management. So basically, you if you have shareholders, your S corporation must have shareholders, and they actually they hold the shares. They own the company. They elect a board of directors that oversees the company's operation. You have some information, some clauses that have to be, let's say, clarified when it comes to a profit distribution, and you also have a pass-through taxation. So the S corporation itself doesn't pay taxes. Individual owners, individual members will have to pay taxes. Individual shareholders will pay taxes when they file their 1040. So the company itself files Form 1120S but doesn't pay taxes at that level. You also have limited liability. Now, those things that I'm telling you, they haven't changed in the last few years, in the last few decades, actually. Okay, they've remained the same since the IRS introduced the whole S corporation. I mean, not in, Congress. Congress introduced the S corporation clause a few decades ago. Okay, they haven't changed. Things like pass-through taxation, profit distribution, ownership and management, limited liability. They have actually remained the same. In the last 40 years, what I've seen is that S corporation and LLCs have become more prominent. Okay, what happens was that LLCs were prominent before, and then when the S corporation came, a lot of entrepreneurs saw actually the benefit of it. Okay, so when it comes to S corporation versus LLCs, nothing has really changed in the last 40 years in terms of the what I call the basic comparison, the basic pros and cons. So if you think about S corporation, you have a streamlined method, a streamlined step when it comes to formation and maintenance, because everything happens through the filing of Form 2553 with the IRS. You have ownership restrictions. That was a biggie. LLCs don't have ownership restrictions. Okay, S corporation S corporations do, and this hasn't changed in the last 40 years. In other words, Congress hasn't changed the law. So if you want to have an S corporation, you cannot have more than 100 shareholders. Okay, and the shareholders must be U.S. citizens or residents. So this is something that hasn't changed at all in the last 40 years. And a couple of years ago, people were trying to really push for a change in the law, but Congress hasn't really moved on that front. So the tax treatment has remained the same. So you also have the fact that for the S corporation or even the LLC, they don't pay taxes at the company level. The shareholders or the members, as they're called for LLCs, they're paying taxes at their personal level. Compliance actually has become harder in the last 40 years when it comes to S corporation. When the S corporation was introduced a couple of decades ago, the IRS wasn't really strict when it comes to compliance. But 20 years ago, 20 to 15 to 20 years ago, the government through the IRS has become more let's say more less lenient, if you will. So nowadays, if you own an S corporation, you better be really, really, really let's say in tip top shape when it comes to compliance. Okay, Same thing when it comes to management. So, S corporations typically feature a structured corporate management framework. Like I said a little earlier, you have a board of directors, you have officers. Okay, so the structure is more rigid, but it clarifies roles and responsibilities, and that also has a change in the last 40 years. The government is more paying attention to those I would say to those configurations. What I've seen in the last 40 years is that S corporations have become very different from C corporations. Back in the days, S corporations were pretty similar, quote unquote, similar to C corporations on certain fronts. But nowadays, you really have seen a lot, like you've seen a very wide gap. Okay, the contrast is pretty is more pronounced, if you will. Nowadays, if you want to choose S corporation versus C corporation, you are really choosing one over another. So if you choose S corporation, you are following a certain path. If you choosing C corporation, you choose another path. One thing for sure, if you are thinking about I mean, let me just explain to you where the differences have actually grown in the last 40 years. That's what I've seen. So, for instance, when it comes to formation and regulatory requirements, basically, S corporations have become stricter in terms of filing articles of incorporation with the states, adopt bylaws, issuing stock, and holding regular board and shareholders meetings. Okay, and the reason is that corporations don't have to go through all that stuff. They can actually outsource the tasks to a third party. But as corporations, you have to be more. You have to look at things more closely, if you will. The tax treatment hasn't changed much. Okay, tax treatment just means that C corporations are paying taxes twice, so double taxation, while S corporations are paying taxes once. I mean, they don't even pay taxes. There's no taxes at the S corporation level, so you have double taxation versus pass through taxation. So that's a major contrast that hasn't changed in the last 40 years. Ownership restrictions have changed a lot. Congress, when they started, they weren't really so strict when it comes to citizenship. Nowadays, it's really pretty clear that if you don't have citizens, if you don't have, let's say, legal residents, you cannot have them in in the ownership of an S corporation. Something you don't have in terms of C corporation. C corporation, you have folks who are like foreigners can actually own shares of a C corporation, especially if the C corporations is publicly traded. Okay, so you have a big contrast there. Things like management and corporate structure are not really that different between S corporation and C corporations. And so, bottom line is that in the last 40 years, what I've seen is that large growth oriented businesses they choose a C corporation setup right off the bat, while S corporations are more suited for small and medium sized businesses that will remain privately owned and want to avoid double taxation. Okay. So if you expect to distribute profits regularly to shareholders, you can benefit from pass through taxation. So that's really cool. In the last 40 years, what I've seen is that the benefits of being an S corporation have really increased big time. I mean, when Congress actually enacted the law a couple of decades ago, the benefits were not really clear. But nowadays, the benefits are pretty clear, and that's why a lot of entrepreneurs, millions of entrepreneurs, or hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs, are really attracted by the whole S corporation path. Okay, so when it comes to benefits, of course, you have double taxation. Okay, so you avoid double taxation. You are also able to pass through losses. Okay, so that's kind of cool because if your business experiences losses, it can pass them through to shareholders and potentially offset other income on shareholders' personal tax returns. This, when you think about it, reduces the shareholders' overall tax burden. Let me explain. Let's say the company lost money, right? $1 million. Shareholders can actually take a portion of that $1 million and reduce their own income on their while filing their Form 1040. You also have the fact that you can maintain limited liability protection through having an S corporation. This is kind of similar to having an LLC. So that's really cool because you have the possibility to make sure if something were to happen, God forbid, something were to happen like lawsuits, bankruptcies, or other financial troubles, you are basically you're saving the business from not the business. You're saving yourself. You're saving your own assets from other problems. Okay. You also in the last few years, what I've seen is that an S corporation has added an extra layer of credibility, accountability, and professionalism to entrepreneurs. What I'm trying to say is that if you are an entrepreneur this year and you open an S corporation, that tells investors, that tells your potential, your potential, let's say, partners, business partners, that you are really serious about business. Okay, that's why you're doing things formally and things legally. Okay, and you also are able to transfer ownership easily through S corporation. Okay, this is something that S corporation owners could not do a few years ago, but 20 to 25 years ago, Congress has revamped the law, and so now it's very easy to sell or gift shares, which can make ownership transfers smoother and create estate planning benefits. So that's really fantastic. In the last 40 years, in the last 30 to 40 years, what I've seen is that actually having an S corporation has become more restrictive. In other words, you have benefits of having an S corporation, but you also have disadvantages of having an S corporation. So those benefits, those drawbacks, were placed, well, actually placed there by Congress to make sure that people do not abuse the S corporation tax status. Okay, and it's also a safeguard for the government to make sure they are tracking who is doing what, especially at the when it comes to paying taxes, when it comes to businesses paying taxes. Okay, so in the last 40 years, what I've seen is that basically an S corporation has become somewhat of a niche legal structure. Let me explain. For instance, you have the shareholder limitations. When they started the whole thing, they did not limit the number of shareholders to 100. But after a while, they limited the number to 100. So okay, and also those shareholders should be, or not should be, they must be all U.S. citizens or residents. That means what? That means if you have even one person, if you have 99 shareholders who are U.S. citizens, but only one is a non-resident, this can really, you can lose your S corporation, let's say, status. Okay, if the IRS finds out, and the IRS does go through some regular audits. Okay, you also have one class of stock. So if your S corporation can only issue one class of stock, this also has been added over time. Congress wanted to limit the sort of quote unquote shenanigans some entrepreneurs might be interested in having. So basically, all shareholders in an S corporation have the same rights and privileges. This can be a disadvantage when your company seeks to attract different types of investors or incentivize employees with different types of stock options. And you also have higher personal taxes. So if your S corporation is highly profitable, as a shareholder, you might pay more in personal income taxes than you would in a C corporation, because S corporation through the pass through taxation model will actually pass they will pass their profits through to shareholders who pay for them at their individual income tax rates. You have increased the IRS scrutiny. I think I've said that before. That's really important. You have reasonable salary requirements. Okay, so that's an important element to think about. You have administrative complexity. That's also another disadvantage, and that hasn't changed at all in the last 40 years. And you have limited flexibility in allocating profits and losses. So let me talk to you about the IRS requirements for an S corporation, and that those requirements haven't changed a lot, even though the I would say the level of detail has changed a little bit. In other words, nowadays the IRS is paying more attention to whatever paperwork you submit if you are trying to form an S corporation. Okay, so what are the major requirements to really think about? One thing for sure, the corporation must be a domestic corporation, meaning that it is incorporated under the laws of a U.S. state or territory. Territory too, not just a state. So that's important. So things like geographies like Virgin Islands, okay, U.S. Virgin Islands will qualify, or D.C. Okay. So there must be 100 or fewer shareholders. So for the purpose of this count, family members can be treated as a single shareholder under specific circumstances. The shareholders must be individuals, certain trusts or estates, partnerships, corporations, and those who are not U.S. citizens or resident cannot be S corporation shareholders. I think I've made that clear before. Also, I think also just said a few minutes ago that the corporation can only have one class of stock, though differences in voting rights among shares are actually permitted. This means a corporation cannot issue preferred stock that others might like in different circumstances. Certain types of corporations cannot elect to be S corporations, including certain financial institutions, insurance companies, and international sales corporations. And the corporation must elect to be an S corporation by filing IRS Form 2553. Okay, so the form is 2553. And one thing I need to say is that when it comes to filing Form 2553, there is an element of timing. For example, the corporation must file the form no more than 2 months and 15 days into the tax year the election is to take effect, or it can do so at any time during the preceding year. If the company files the form late, S corporation status might not take effect until the next tax year, unless the IRS grants relief for a late election under certain circumstances. And all shareholders must agree to the election and sign the form. They have to sign the form. So in the last 40 years, what I've seen is that creating an S corporation actually has become more streamlined. Okay, you can do it yourself, or you can just go to a third party like company formation service to kind of help you out. But the process is relatively similar. So first of all, you need to form a corporation. So select a unique business name that complies with your state's naming rules and is not already in use. Prepare and file the articles of incorporation with your state's business filing agency. So those documents outline, for instance, the company's basic information, purpose, and structure. You want to create bylaws that explain the company's operating rules, shareholder rights, and procedures for meetings and decision making. And you also need to appoint directors and officers like the president, the secretary, the treasurer to manage the company's affairs. And you need to issue shares of stock to the company's shareholders according to their ownership percentages. That's number one. Number one, you want to form a corporation. Number two, you want to elect S corporation status. I think I've said that before. Complete and file Form 2553 with the IRS. You need to obtain actually you need to obtain an EIN, an employer identification number. You also need to comply with ongoing requirements. So if you have an S corporation, you must hold annual shareholder and board meetings to follow corporate formalities. You need to keep detailed corporate records of all business transactions, meeting minutes, and shareholder information. Okay, I'm showing you on the screen here Form 1120S. You need to file this form annually. So file this form, and you need to. This is actually the U.S. tax return for the S corporation. You also need to submit Schedule K-1s for each shareholder reporting their share of the company's income, deduction, and credits. Okay, that's really important. So you can see on the screen here. Here are the shareholders' instructions for Schedule K1. Okay, so that's important to really keep this in mind. So, in conclusion to this conversation, I'll share with you the changes I've seen in the last 40 years happening to the S corporation tax status. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.